Today we're diving into something many of you have asked about, turning your hobby into a thriving freeze-drying business. Mykal, we've seen plenty of folks start out with just a small home freeze dryer. What's usually the biggest challenge when making that leap into commercial operation?
Biggest hurdles is capacity. Home units are great for personal projects or small batches, but commercial freeze drying means scaling up your equipment and managing increased production demands. Choosing the right equipment becomes crucial because it's an investment that can make or break your profitability. When I sold freeze dryers, I always told people, well, what's your end game, with this freeze dryer? Are you just going to be freeze drying your leftovers, or were you planning on making some candy to sell or something business related? And I'd say 9 times out of 10 it was just to do the leftovers, but every now and then you'd have somebody that wanted to start with a small machine and go into business. And I always had to try to let them know, well, here's a unique opportunity for you to make your investment on the front side, so that way you can meet your capacity needs on the back side. When I explained it as, if you start out with the largest model you can afford, it's going to be cheaper than buying two of the smaller units put together, to make that investment on the front side. I said, look at your market, look at the amount of freeze-dried candy you plan on selling or freeze-dried food you plan on selling, and go from there. If there's a viable business in this, then make that investment on the front side and go with the biggest machine you can. So
We see way too many people that, get a medium machine or even a small, and they're having so much fun and they want to start a business and then realize, when you first get something like this, you think it's so big and you feel like you have all this capacity.
yeah.
If it's your first freeze dryer and it's a medium, it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And you think you can just do so much with it, but then when you really get into commercial scale stuff, it's just the size is lacking. So
Absolutely.
speaking of equipment, when do you think it's time for someone to upgrade from a home freeze dryer to a large commercial system?
It's affordable to go with the home freeze dryer, but the downside to that is you're going to be running that thing nonstop. I know businesses that never turn their machine off. My worry is that a lot of the home freeze dryers, like the Harvest Right or the Blue Alpine, they're not designed to be run that often, or that hard, especially with candy, because candy vaporizes a lot of the sugars into the pump. And if you're really going hard with your business, you're going to be going through pumps like crazy. It depends. If this is just something that you want to do from time to time, to supplement your income with, candy sales at your church or something like that, then stick with the machine you
Weekend
got.
only farmers markets or
Yeah,
something, fun little side gig. Yeah.
exactly. But if you have goals and aspirations to, move into a commercial kitchen and, start making contracts with local gas stations or grocery stores, then it's obviously going to be time to look at this from an actual business standpoint, where you generate a major business plan and then you work backwards from there. Capitalization is key. So to make sure that you're properly funded, if you're going to be bootstrapping everything yourself, it's a little tough to afford one of the major commercial machines. But on the backside, you're going to have a machine that's designed like a tank, and it's designed to work just nonstop. The defreeze is excellent model of that, because that machine is, I mean, it's just built to run no matter what. So yeah, like I said, that it all depends on how you plan on managing your business and what you plan on doing with it. It's also when you're consistently maxing out your home system and turning away opportunities because of limited production capacity. That's when it's clear you're ready for a bigger machine, something like a mid-sized commercial freeze dryer that can handle large batches and keep up with demand. But then again, you get into the large commercial machines, yeah, and there's this vast space in between a commercial desktop unit and like the Parker or Kudon. Now that defreeze has come out, you have essentially the technology of a Parker or a Kudon from my absolute, digging into what I saw when I was, hands-on with that machine. You have the technology of that in a tabletop unit now. And so, as from a business standpoint, starting small would be starting with a commercial um, tabletop unit and honestly scaling to the point where, say, you get up to 100 of them, running off a single massive vacuum pump. That's scaling with, the durability of a rugged commercial unit with the idea when it comes to maintenance that, if machine 28 and 52 go down for maintenance, you're not gonna just completely stop production. And that's the benefits of going with the tabletop route and scaling large with them is
And
you could have a third of your machines down, but you're still meeting your contract needs, because you're still making production. So when you get with a large, single unit, boy, if that thing goes down, you better have some cash on hand, while
you
that's
just went
being
from
repaired.
100% processing capability to zero. So yeah, that decision between, like a big single machine, I've always thought it would be safer
Yeah.
to have, if you want 500 pounds of processing capacity, then, 10 machines that run 50 pounds per machine versus a single machine,
Hmm.
I'm going to take a bank of 10 machines over that,
Yeah.
just in my opinion.
But then you get to the point where like you get into a large industrial operation where you're doing, say, 1,000 pounds a week or, even 5,000 pounds a week of raw, wet product, then it would make sense to go with, like a Parker 6 or a Parker 10 or something like that, where, you can, or two or three of them, to be able to meet a massive capacity need. But so there's I guess we're getting into the realm now where you have the small business, the mid-sized business, and then the massive business when it comes to freeze drying. And so there's strategies at plays for all of those. But I think with the commercial desktop units that are coming out now, it's really going to allow that small business to scale up to the point where they meet that, large small business needs to at that point determine if they want to, go up to 200 tabletop units or finally invest
Yeah.
like the 250,000 or however much they are into an industrial unit or not.
Yeah, I'd say there's basically like almost like threshold, if you're going to be doing more than probably 500 pounds of processing per batch, then I think that'd be the threshold of going into like your large industrial machine.
Yeah.
You're probably better off going with a single large machine. So, what about cost though? That seems to be a sticking point for a lot of our listeners. How can someone manage the financial risk when stepping into commercial equipment?
That all boils down to your business plan, making sure that it's rock solid. Managing costs starts with proper, thorough planning. You need to consider financing options, potential buyback programs, releasing equipment. Also, forecasting your production and sales realistically will help you match your investment to expected income. And don't overshoot your initial capacity, but also don't underinvest and bottleneck your operation. Bottlenecking your operation is essentially bringing on too many, contracts and promises, because promises that you can't fulfill will backfire big time. Companies don't
Yeah,
want to, rely on you to be able to make a product for them, and be excited about it. And all of a sudden you start hearing excuses.
that doesn't really work for big contracts.
Exactly. So, but don't underinvest either, like we were talking about earlier, where you get, a medium home unit, and think all of a sudden you're, gonna break into the freeze drying game and become a millionaire because you're just not. Yeah. I mean, like
It's not,
up here in North Idaho, we have such a low population density, but we have a lot of freeze dried companies doing candy and
there
stuff.
are. Idaho's full.
So looking at your market, is it oversaturated with other candy makers? Other elements that you can go into instead of candy because of that? Like I tell a lot of people, the pet industry is really wide open right now.
Yep.
Maybe kind of re-strategize. I mean, everybody loves the candy because it's an easy sell, but with pet food, you actually have to, put the carnival music away and actually, put the business glasses on and start thinking, realistically, because it's not just about your appearance and your, booth setup. It's about the quality product that you have, because ultimately that's going into, your best friend.
That's solid advice. Do you think there's value in starting small and gradually scaling? Should a new business try to hit the ground running with larger equipment from day one?
Well, it all depends on your business plan. If
Yeah.
your business plan shows an immediate need for a specific product or a specific area of the freeze drying industry, that's where it's really going to make or break your starting decision. Because if there's, a massive need, like say there's zero candy companies in the area and you're in a major urban area where there's a ton of Saturday markets or farmers markets and stuff like that, and honestly you've never seen a candy company there, then obviously there's a major need, because there's going to be a ton of people that are going to be excited about it finally arriving, because they've probably seen it on TikTok, they've probably seen it on social media, and now all of a sudden, boom, here you are. So if you're going to be, the breakthrough or the entry point into the industry in your area, then your business plan should show that and show evidence of that. And if you can get funding and financing to be able to, jump on that, you got a wide open market for you to get your product in front of. So at that point, you would probably want to take on a little bit more risk, maybe a little bit more debt, but everything's kind of subjective when it comes to your starting point in this. And, if you do little research and you just see something on TikTok and you want to mimic it, good luck, best of business to
Yeah.
you. I hope you do well. But, having a solid strategy, having a strategy for what to do when maintenance issues occur or breakages occur, having parts on hand, knowing how to do the repairs yourself is a critical thing. And it wouldn't hurt to have a local HVAC company ahead of time know that, hey, I got this machine. Most HVAC people don't want to mess with it. I'm willing to, work with you here or pay you a little extra or whatever. If you can get comfortable enough to be able to help me, that's all in your networking and how you're able to support your business with other businesses locally to you. And that's also a key part of your strategy there. So I would say, your investment though, it all depends on your business plan and what you're able to investigate.
Yeah, and we tend to see a lot of people, the typical route of I bought a machine. I think the most famous route getting into business is I bought a machine for home. I saw the potential to start a small business on the side, for fun, and they catch traction and it grows into something full time. So I think that's, I guess, what you would say the most natural path we see for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. That's an entry point into business for a lot of people outside of freeze drying too. They saw a gimmick that they thought they could market, or some kind of niche thing in the industry that they admire. They found that they had, something on hand that can, either create it or create something close to it. So I mean, it's not that it's unheard of, but in the freeze drying industry, you're dealing with I hate to call it a major startup cost, but if you're a limited income, like a retiree or something like that, the cost of one of these freeze dryers is considered a major purchase. Even something as small as a medium, that you're breaking into this could really be where you're making the decision of, I can't really afford it, but if I sell some candy on the side, I might be able to pay this off quick. And so I see that a lot in this industry where, people go above their means, take on added debt, max out their credit card, all in the name of trying to slang a little candy on the side just to make back their return.
Yeah. Love it. Michael, there's talk about the business side. Let's talk about the business side a bit more. How important is marketing for new freeze drying business, and what are some effective strategies?
Marketing is crucial. Building brand awareness and communicating the unique benefits of freeze-dried products to customers can significantly impact success. Social media platforms are fantastic for this, especially visual ones like Instagram and TikTok. Posting behind the scenes content, production videos, and testimonials from satisfied customers can engage your audience and boost credibility. And I got to say the social media is really good for marketing your candy because for the most part, people go on social media to, kind of escape from their crappy day. And, where they see some, kids playing and eating some candy and having fun, might bring a smile to their face. That's great. Other elements of the freeze-dried industry, you're probably not going to have the same, effect like freeze-dried food, for example. It's very rare that you see videos unless it's like somebody out hiking or camping, ripping open a pack of freeze-dried meals or something like that and dumping some boiling water in it. But marketing your product is substantial, especially even for a small business, because it's all about word of mouth and building that brand awareness and that trust that people have when they see your products out and about. That'll bring them back and, say, "Oh yeah, I've seen this person. They're local here and they were at, this event that I was at in the north side of town and I saw their booth, but I didn't have an opportunity to go over there, but I saw
Mhm.
the clown head on their flag or their tent and, I remember them." So
Mhm.
that's where, marketing helps future sales as well.
Great tips. Speaking of marketing, how can new businesses effectively leverage partnerships or collaborations?
And, that's all about networking. There's always, in almost every single city that I've ever been in, networking groups, dads in business, moms in business, and they usually meet up. I know one local here in Coeur d'Alene. They meet up so that way they can have a networking event and then go to their store and open up shop or go, open the doors to their construction company or whatever. But there's a ton of ways for people to network in their local community to be able to build those partnerships, build those collaborations where, say, you're doing pet food and, you got a really great product, you just don't have any leads to get you into storefronts, shake their hand and say, "Hey, I got this really great product. I'd love to bring a sample to you." Every dog's that, we've sold at the fairs and stuff, they tend to love it too. Let's see if it's something that we can bring into your store. And boom, that's how networking works. It's chance, but you got to be able to be in the position for that chance to take place. You can't just be stuck in your house wondering why Facebook's not working out for you. Get out there and
Yeah,
talk to people.
smart. Let's talk about distribution. Once you start scaling, distribution becomes critical. What's your advice on managing this effectively?
Distribution is indeed a key aspect. Starting locally or regionally can keep logistics manageable initially. Utilize local distributors or consider shipping direct to customers with reliable customer service. Eventually, investing in professional warehousing or fulfillment service becomes necessary, particularly as order volumes grow. That's a long ways down the road. I mean, you're not
Mhm.
going to get to the point where you need to start warehousing your candy for a long time. go ahead and throw in your business report and you'll see, if you do a proper investigation into your market, you're going to see that you're not going to hit that until you start getting like regional areas of your product, where you're in like three or
Hmm.
four states at a time,
Hmm.
then you'll start looking at, warehousing or, having a separate facility just for production and the other facility for, managing your logistics. But, it's not something that's going to be critical right at the incept of your business. Um,
Yeah.
but it is key. One major factor you need to remember too when you're starting out. Most people start out as a cottage food, law or industry.
Yep.
So knowing your state's laws and requirements for the cottage food sector and, whether you can ship, inside the state you're at, or if you can ship across state lines, what do I need to be able to do? Do I need to go up into a commercial facility? Do I need to be recognized through the FDA? This or that. Having that firm understanding of your limitations and, how to achieve those limitations is critical when it comes to distribution because, you don't want to get slapped with a fine or get your business shut down because, you were shipping candy, across state lines without the proper, legal ability to. So,
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely a lot of restriction when it comes to being a cottage license. I know that, most states they don't allow you to do any dairy or any meat, and you can't ship interstate because of regulation. So being in a cottage license can be restrictive, but it can also be a really like fun little place for people to start as well because it's a lot less stressful than being commercial. You're working out of your home, you're getting used to the processing and stuff, so it can be a great place to start. And I don't think anybody should jump into commercial until they're really comfortable with,
yeah.
especially if you're starting small and you're not starting commercial. If you're going to start cottage, take advantage of that, understand your equipment, and that's going to help you scale effectively.
Yeah, your research doesn't need to be as in depth either when you go into a cottage food lab. Granted, you still need a
Yeah.
strong business plan, but there's a lot of forgiveness when it comes to the industry under the cottage food laws. But as you scale and you become larger, going into the commercial sector, you're subject to a lot more restrictions, a lot more inspections, a lot more licenses that you have to have. You're going to
Hmm.
be required to have proper nutrition labels on your food. The term that they use in the cottage world is TCS. Well, I mean, in the entire food industry is TCS, which is temperature controlled foods. Temperature controlled foods are items that need refrigeration or freezers for it to stay essentially not go bad. And candy falls under the non-TCS foods. And so non-TCS foods can also mean like, cupcakes or bread, so there's it's a lot more than just, candy when it comes to cottage law that you can be selling. But when you go commercial and you're able to mess with the TCS foods, then you can go into, freeze-dried ice cream, freeze-dried specific fruits, items that are, low in acidity or high in acidity. I forget which one it is. It's one or the other. But I mean, it does open up your ability to get your food and more food and better products in front of a larger audience too. So there's an incentive to grow into the commercial sector because it allows you to have a wider range of products and get a lot more creative. But you're, yeah, a great starting point, especially if you don't have the capitalization to afford or the financials to afford, large major industrial units or the commercial tabletop units, and you're forced to start with a home unit. Yeah, you're looking into the cottage sector.
So how about navigating the regulatory landscape? It seems like something many business owners underestimate initially.
Yeah, regulatory landscape should be a part of your business plan and your strategy. And that ties into, are you going to be doing TCS foods or non-TCS foods? Are you going to be doing the cottage route? Are you going to be going into the commercial sector? Are you going to be dealing with meat? Meat has its own regulatory items. That's not how the government works.
No,
If you mess up, they're going to come in, they're going to bring the hammer with them. And I don't care if you're a sweet 80-year-old lady, or, you're the most savvy business, professional on the planet, an entrepreneur at heart. When they bring that hammer, they bring it hard. And like I said, there's no forgiveness. So having a strong research, a strong business plan is critical to be able to navigate that regulatory landscape successfully, because all of that should have been accounted for before you even thought about buying a freeze dryer.
absolutely. So let's shift gears slightly. How important is product innovation in staying ahead of industry trends?
Huge. Innovation is a
Yep.
cornerstone of sustained success. Keeping an eye on emerging trends like specialty diets, organics, or locally sourced ingredients and unique flavors can help set your products apart. Engaging customers for feedback and regularly refreshing your offerings keep your brand relevant and exciting. One of the key developments right now in the 2025 and beyond is food coloring. A lot of people are starting to go with a more natural diet, sugar-free, no food coloring, nor artificial dyes, even artificial flavors. You're starting to see this swing back in our society where, and I ain't gonna lie, growing up as a Gen Xer, it was, McDonald's and TV is what, I grew up with. And now, as a parent myself, I couldn't imagine, putting my children in that situation, knowing that every now and then or an occasional drift into the junk food is one thing, but if you're going to raise children up with the food that we had when we were kids, it's you're dealing with levels of obesity, diabetes, and stuff like that, health conditions and stuff. So to be able to stay ahead of, shifts in perception of your products is going to help you tremendously, and that may incentivize you into moving into that commercial realm where you can see that, people are not so thrilled with my freeze-dried Skittles anymore because there's a really big shift towards, ending the food colorings and stuff like that. But one of the ladies at my event who has a commercial kitchen was dipping, apple slices in caramel and freeze drying them. And that was a fantastic sweet candy trick, with a more healthy, option to it. So, being able to be unique in that situation can help you navigate your business through emerging trends and the perception of whatever your food may appeal to one group or another. So,
And there's definitely a lot of experimenting. I guess if I would give any advice, I would do a lot of experimenting with changing the sizes of items and things like that, and creating, maybe smaller bites of average things, or adding flavors, almost like marinating things and creating your own products. Because, through the years we've really rummaged through a lot of things, and people have tried quite a bit, and there's so many different products on the market. The being
mhm.
original now is not nearly as easy as it was, 3 years ago. Wash the color off the Skittles and add a different color back, and it was original.
Innovation also drives success. And, we wouldn't have near as, greatest stuff as we have today without somebody saying, how can I do this better? How can
Yep.
I change something to make it less maintenance or, produce more or run stronger or run faster or whatever. So, you know,
Like your personal experiment with the combination of something that's deep fried and freeze dried, and fun, interesting things like that to really keep it different is really crucial. Because and you go to an event and six booths are all carrying 80% of the same items, it's really hard to make anything stand out. So let's discuss team building. What should entrepreneurs consider as they expand their teams?
Building the right team is critical. Focusing on bringing in individuals who share your passion, but also complement your skill set, clearly defined roles, invest in training, and create positive workplace culture to retain talent. A strong team supports steady growth and enables you to focus on strategic tasks. This is one subject that the small business side really has trouble with. I remember in our Sean Jones interview, he said that they do as much as they want to, take care of their employees. There's times where they just can't provide as much as they want to because they are still a small business. But he said he's always willing to, buy steel or composite toed boots, whatever he can do to try to show that he's honest and sincere in his wanting to be the best place to work on the planet. It's just that they may be waiting to get paid from one contract to a next. And so being able to pay your employees, because everybody wants to make $1 million an hour. I mean, that's one thing, but to be able to pay your employees correctly based upon, your income coming in, your outgoing debts and liabilities, and to be able to look at your financials from a standpoint of can I afford what I want to pay for people? If you can't, then try to do something to be able to retain that talent because you're going to lose some really great players, really great team members because you can't pay them enough, or business takes a dive all of a sudden, and now you got to let a couple people go, which is heartbreaking to do, but it's just how industry is. But so it's tough, especially as a small business owner, because you don't want to ever have to fire anyone. But, there you are in a position where, hey, it's close to Christmas time and all of a sudden we can't sell any candy. I'm sorry, I gotta let you go. I know it's close to Christmas and stuff, but it is what it is. But yeah, building a strong team. But also on the flip side of that, you got to remember as a business owner, if you're coming at this with the mindset of a business owner, nobody's going to have the same amount of passion as you do about your own business. Nobody goes to work for somebody else with as much passion and drive and innovation and, ambition to make that business successful as a business owner themselves. And so it's you're never going to find another you in this industry. So find the best you can. And, if they're not the best that you can find, are they trainable? Are they malleable? Can you mold them into the people that you need for your business? So those are all elements that you need to consider as a small business owner.
Finally, what advice would you give to someone right now listening and thinking maybe it's time to turn my freeze drying hobby into a business?
First, validate your idea. See if there's a market beyond friends and family.
Hmm.
Second, crunch your numbers and create a solid business plan. And finally, connect with other entrepreneurs who've successfully made the leap. There's immense value in learning from those who've walked the path before you. And what's great about the candy market is, just because you're setting up shop in Seattle, doesn't mean you're going to interfere with the market in New Orleans. And so, reach out to people in other markets, and say, hey, I got this rock solid business idea here. Can you maybe sign an NDA or something like that, go over it and see if it's, something that, is on par or close to, as great as you think it's going to be. You may realize that you made a critical error in some of your thought processes, and you're only going to find that out because some of these other businesses that you network with made that mistake before. Oh man, I mean, that sounds great, but nobody's looking for that product, and, we lost thousands of dollars on that idea, so don't do it. That might really change your perception on the industry. But what's great about candy is, it's such a localized market that you have the opportunity for people to share and exchange ideas and grow together, in their own markets, sharing the ideas and experiences with each other. But don't get me wrong, other markets may have candies that are more sought after than you. For example,
Mm-hmm.
if you're, you know, down in Phoenix or Tucson, Arizona, Chamoy Skittles and Tajín and all that might be
Yeah.
really, a strong economy down there, being close to the US Mexico border. But, setting up a candy shop in Fargo, North Dakota, you might need to focus on something different. I know up here in North
Right.
Idaho, huckleberries are the big thing. So huckleberry taffy, huckleberry this, huckleberry that.
Yeah.
You go down into, say, Laredo, Texas. I doubt anybody even knows what a huckleberry is.
Yeah, it's definitely very geographic, which makes it really fun because also, like you stated, it's, candy businesses, it's, we've come to learn it's not easy to ship freeze-dried candy. It basically, some of it at scale is almost not possible. It's just too fragile. It's going too far. It's incurring, it's crushing down in the bag, and by the time it shows up across the nation, it's powder.
Hmm.
So it creates this unique network where products can't actually go as far as others. Especially in candy, foods and everything are fine, but especially candy, you can really create something for your area that won't be infiltrated by others so easily. They'll have to be local as well.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
if you can really come up with a great business plan that's unique for your area, there's a good chance that it's going to last a long time before anybody can replicate. Great insights, Michael. All right, folks, that's it for today's extended episode. Keep sending in your questions, and remember, if you're ready to scale, make sure your plan is well prepared is as well prepared as your product. We'll catch you next time on the Freeze Dried Guys.
Have a good one, everyone. Thank you for
See
tuning
ya.
in. And yeah, always hit that like and share and support button. This is our first video podcast, so we're going to put this up on YouTube and see how we go. And so feel free to subscribe to the channel. And, if you see us on Facebook, say hi. But we are the Freeze Dried Guys. I'm Mykal Taylor.
Colt Crisp.
All right. And thank you for joining our show. Have a good one.
See ya, everybody.